What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Coach's Quarters. I am your host, Jacob Meadows. Today, I will be joined all show by our miserable resident expert on the Miami Dolphins. He's had a really rough time here lately, and luckily the show's not gonna bury him any further because the Dolphins are going on a bye, and we have nothing to talk about because they've had all the same problems for the last 5 weeks. So, without any further ado, welcome, Joey McGinnis.
Love that. Thanks, man. Glad to be back, and I'm super excited to not talk about the state of the Dolphins this week.
Yeah, it's a pretty sad time out there for the Dolphins. However, at least Tua's undergoing an further evaluation to see if he can return this year. He probably shouldn't, but he is definitely trying to do so. So we are going to jump right into some fun content. This show's going to be a little different than what most of my shows are. This is not going to be a post-game recap or a pre-game positioning on where we think things are going to go for week 6. This is going to be more of just an around the league episode with just random facts and tidbits of information to kind of either help you with fantasy football or just gauge the current status of the NFL as we stand now. Some of this stuff will have come to fruition prior to the show airing. However, a lot of this will still be useful after the fact. So to kick this show off, my resident Miami expert, Joey, has introduced me to a new gambling app that allows legal sports gambling in Texas. It is called the Sleeper app. It is all prop bets, nothing like what my claim to fame was in Vegas, where we were betting on overs and unders and money lines and all the fun things of that nature. No, it is prop betting, and we suck at it, don't we, Joey?
We're terrible. Haven't hit, I think I hit one bet in the last 2 weeks.
You got that one good hit, and that's one more hit than I've gotten. It turns out prop betting is incredibly difficult. I have no idea who's going to score a touchdown on any given week. No idea whose yards are going to go over and under. Do you happen to remember what you bet on when you actually hit? Because you won a couple of $100. It was a really good bet with multiple legs on it. Do you remember the gist of what you actually bet on?
I believe it was a live bet at halftime of a Dolphins game. I don't remember the opponent. But it was all unders. I took under on A-Chain, I believe, under on whoever the quarterback was. I think it might have been Skylar Thompson that game. I don't know.
I think it was Skylar Thompson.
And that's the only one I've hit. The unders were riding for me this past week. I felt real good about a halftime bet. Jacoby Brissett managed to ruin that for me at the very end of the game. I took the under on his yards, which was at 113. Very low line for a quarterback, and he was going to hit until Miami managed to not get a first down with 45 seconds left to run the clock out, and Brissett threw for about 50 yards to just end the game. It was heartbreaking. Just
absolutely brutal. And then last night we bet again because one of the, you fire enough shots in the air and eventually you're going to hit something. And I know my bet busted because I thought Patrick Mahomes would throw over 1.5 touchdowns. It turns out he was the worst quarterback in the NFL in the red zone last night. Yeah, last night for Monday Night Football. He was terrible in the red zone. They lost a fumble. He threw a pick. They had a bunch of stuff taken back. They were terrible. You also had a big bet that looked good on paper that busted last night, did you not?
Yep, Kamara can't score, and Derek Carr decided to just not throw the football last night. Well, he threw the football, actually.
He threw it plenty.
Agree. He threw it pretty well, just couldn't complete anything. So.
Yeah, so is the state of gambling in Texas. We're both so excited for the day that, maybe we'll actually be able to sports gamble for real here because prop betting is absolutely eating a hole in our pockets. But moving on from prop betting, something sad to something a little more happy. We're going to go ahead and cover the Texans. There were a couple of big things going on with Houston this weekend, this Sunday. The Texans did beat the Bills. It was a fun game, so to speak. In the first drive by the Texans, we had Nico Collins score a 67-yard touchdown off of a beautiful pass from C.J. Stroud where he, turned and faced the opposing sideline, crossed his arms. It was a real gangster move on his part. Nico Collins never played another snap. So Nico Collins pulled up towards the end of that run as he gingerly walked into the end zone. It has now been diagnosed as a hamstring injury, and he is day-to-day, but they are saying he may miss multiple weeks per D'Amico Ryans. I know you're not a Texans fan, but how do you feel that actually hurts the Texans in the long run with Nico being arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL this season? Where do you think that slots Houston with Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie having to step up and fill his void?
I definitely think it benefits Stephon Diggs. I think that's going to be something to watch. He's obviously new to the team and might not have had as much time to mesh as Nico Collins has had with C.J. Stroud. They just seem to have they've been perfect together. They didn't miss a beat. C.J. Stroud came in last year, and they just had instant chemistry. Tank Dell's another one. Could be interesting to see. He's that guy that he was an exciting rookie. You've obviously been very excited about him. And he's kind of a guy that he's the hard to not like. So I hope he gets some more targets, gets some more catches, but I don't think the Texans are hurting. Nico Collins is a big hole to fill, but C.J. Stroud and the Texans are a great team. So
I love that. Yeah, I am a big Tank Dell fan. He is a City of Houston legend coming out of the Cougs program. I am a little worried, although Robert Woods seems to have turned the dial back just a little bit, and he looked good this past week. He looked good on the kick return. So hopefully Steven Sims never returns another punt or kick, and Robert Woods takes over for that, and we'll have a little bit of burst at the wide receiving core. Because as you said, we do have some studs in the wide receivers room, despite Nico Collins' injury. We have Tank Dell. Xavier Hutchinson came on really big after Nico Collins got hurt. John Mechie still has yet to prove himself. And Stephon Diggs has been a touchdown scoring machine. If you drafted Stephon Diggs after like round 5 in your fantasy league this season, you're looking good with his 5 or 6 touchdowns on the season currently. But we're also missing Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce, something that you should be pretty well aware of, seeing as how Raheem Mostert's been hurt for most of the year. Devon Achane is now injured. You have a rookie that's taking more snaps than either of them currently. Compared to the Dolphins, how much do you think it affects a team to be down their RB1 and 2 at the same time? Is that something that it could just be a death knell for a team, despite the fact that we have Dara Gumbawale and Cam Akers running for us? Do you think losing your RB1 and RB2 is enough to actually hurt a team? Is it hard to establish a run game when you don't have the guys that you were really planning on running?
For probably about 90% of the teams in the league, losing your top 2 running backs is going to hurt. The Chiefs, I think they're one of those teams. It doesn't matter who they throw back there. They could sign Kareem Hunt off the street, and he'll come in and put up 100 yards. The Dolphins, they are atrocious, but one thing they have been able to do is sort of run the ball. They got a not great offensive line, but they're just so deep at running back. So they're kind of an anomaly as far as losing your top 2. The Texans, I don't know. Cam Akers, he's a guy I took a prop bet on a couple weeks ago, and I think he had 12 yards or something. It was terrible. He didn't look terrible Sunday, but I don't think it's anything he can consistently do. Gumbawale is kind of a Texans legend at this point already. Not many running backs can come in and kick a field goal, so he's always an exciting player. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what the Texans can do without Joe Mixon, because he's on a couple of my fantasy teams, and I'm also missing him. So
I love that you mentioned Kareem Hunt. We both bet Kareem Hunt's over on run yards last night. Both of us had that hit. It does seem that Kareem Hunt has just turned the clock back, so to speak, and he looks like he never left Kansas City in the first place. He looked absolutely fantastic last night, which we bet on it, but I genuinely didn't know if that's actually what would have come of that. And turns out Kareem Hunt's still a great running back. And as you pointed out to me last night while we were watching the game, it is crazy that he didn't land with another team faster so that Kansas City could not re-sign him, because he looks fresh. He looks like he's running hard, and he really does look good.
And another point to that, the contract he signed, we were both kind of shocked when we saw. I think it was $1.25 million.
No kidding. For. Yeah, like a vet minimum deal.
There's 7 or 8 teams that could have used him that had $1.2 million laying around.
And it's crazy because Isaiah Pacheco broke his fibula, or his leg in general. I don't remember the actual specific bone he broke. Pretty sure it was his fibula, but he broke his leg. And now we're looking at the fact that there's a real world opportunity for Kareem Hunt to still go over 1,000 run yards this season, despite not coming on until week 5.
If he runs like he did last night, he should hit that no problem. Yeah. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was cleared to come back from the PUP list, so he's been disappointing since his rookie year, but you never know. He could come back and run well.
They might really just have a good 1-2 punch moving forward, which is disgusting. But, props to Kansas City on that one. But the Texans did win it. It was an ugly victory versus the Bills. I don't know how sustainable it'll be, depending on how injuries start racking up, this, that, and the other. We do not have a super difficult schedule moving forward. It is not crazy to think that Houston could go, 9-3, 9-4 at the max over the next 10 games, which would be really, really dope. That'd be great for the Texans. Hopefully the Dolphins are able to pick it up. But it does feel that that is going to be solely dependent on Tua's recovery and re-entrance into the team. So, prayers out for the Dolphins, especially with all these hurricanes about to hit. Kind of a tangent that we can go on that one. But shout out to everybody in Florida. Hopefully everybody stays safe. The damage is crazy. There's 2 more hurricanes on the way. It might just not be the Dolphins here. Y'all are going to get blown away. So
the Dolphins continue to disappoint me. I was rooting for a loss on Sunday. I want the high draft pick. Nope, we got to beat the Patriots. Somehow there is a world, there's a timeline where the Dolphins do win the division. They are currently sitting at 1-1 in the division, tied with all 3 other teams. They're 2-3. It could happen. Not saying it will, but it's a possibility.
Not even saying it should. Wouldn't it be cool if they were able to bring in Cam Ward from the University of Miami to sit behind Tua or start over Tua, despite the massive contract they gave him? If, however, the Dolphins are able to do it, if they're able to get out from under this contract they paid to Tua should he retire, this, that, and the other, how cool would it be to have Cam Ward transition from U of Miami to the Miami Dolphins?
That'd be awesome. Most Miami fans would support that fully. Love Tua, but, whatever it takes to win.
Exactly. Next man up, right?
That's it.
Next one, I'm going to talk a little bit. Separation Sunday is going to be coming up on Mine and the Mean Gene show for 97.5 Houston. This Sunday, we will be breaking down the teams that seem to be separating from the pack and who seems to be getting left behind. So you'll have a bunch of 1-4, 1-3, 1-5 teams. We'll see, who may be distancing themselves from the bottom, whereas they're at the top. We'll be able to analyze kind of who's pulling away in their respective divisions and who we now think will end up winning the divisions in comparison to what we announced earlier in the season. So please listen to ESPN 97.5 this Sunday from 7 to 9 p.m. with me and the Mean Gene Show as we break down everything happening for Separation Sunday. But all right, next segment, we are going to go around the league. Just some interesting little things that are happening. We're going to break each one down individually and kind of talk about what the ramifications might be should these things come to fruition. So the first one that I've got listed out for us today is that Shane Steichen this morning announced that despite how well Joe Flacco has played for the Colts, and he is playing lights out for the Colts, as soon as Anthony Richardson is healthy, Joe Flacco goes back to the bench. Anthony Richardson gets reinserted as QB1 of the Colts, regardless of how good he may play or this, that, and the other. Joey, how do you feel that is going to benefit the Colts versus a win-now mentality under Joe Flacco? Do you truly believe that the development of Anthony Richardson at this point, instead of letting him learn behind Joe Flacco, that allowing him to get live reps will benefit the Colts more in the long term?
I think they really need to see what they have in Richardson still. He played just a couple games last year before he got hurt out for the season. First game of the season this year, he looked pretty good, and after that, didn't look so great. He's definitely got the potential, but like you said, Joe Flacco is just balling out. He came in and was an instant spark for that team. It's tough. It's a tough call for the coach, whether you go with the 40-year-old journeyman who has won a Super Bowl. Everybody in the league loves him. He can obviously still play football. Or do you go with the electric young player who has all the potential in the world? He can throw the ball 75 yards off his back foot. That guy's got a cannon of an arm, but he might not be the best football player. So we'll have to see.
Beautiful breakdown. And banging off of your electric comment, something electric happened this morning. The Jets have fired Bob Salah mid-season. It took 5 weeks of him and Aaron Rodgers hating each other before Woody Johnson, who neglected to tell anybody in the Jets organization what was happening, fired Bob Salah instead of firing Nathaniel Hackett, whom 99% of anybody who watches football thought was actually going to get fired. How did you feel about the Bob Salah firing, being a Miami fan and being in the same division as the amazing and wonderful New York Jets?
As a Dolphins fan, I love seeing the Jets crash and burn. It's never gets old. It happens every year, it feels like, and every single time it's just like, it makes me feel happy. Although, my dad is a lifelong Jets fan, so in the back of my heart, just a little bit, I feel bad for them because I see his pain, and I know as a Dolphins fan, it's hurt. And I know as a Jets fan, it's hurt even more. So I don't envy them at all. They have a lot more recent success, if you could call it that, in the last 20 years than the Dolphins have. But they also just seem to be that one franchise that even when things are going right, signing Aaron Rodgers, getting all these young players. They had the offensive and defensive rookies of the year a couple years ago. The future looked so bright, and here they are firing their head coach halfway through the season. So I just don't think the Jets are ever going to figure it out, it seems like.
In the same vein as Bob Salah's firing, the Jets are still ironically one of the top two contenders to obtain Devontae Adams from the Raiders. Do you believe that A, the Jets are actually a front runner for him? And B, do you think that with Bob Salah gone, the defensive-minded head coach, and them giving their DC the interim head coach capabilities, do you think if Devontae Adams gets brought into the Jets organization, do you think that he might be able to turn this season around for the Jets, seeing as how there have been so many dropped balls by Jets receivers, namely Alan Lazard, and the chemistry between Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson looks good? So do you think if they plug and play Devontae Adams into this roster, do you believe that he may actually be able to provide the spark the Jets need to win, more than half of their games?
Nope, I don't. That being said, I hope they do trade a second-round pick for him. I hope they mortgage their future yet again. The Jets need to rebuild. They need to get a young quarterback. They need to get some more young players. And signing a 30-something-year-old receiver who, he's had great chemistry with Rodgers in the past. They were one of the most exciting quarterback-receiver duos. But they're both old. They're both a few years removed from their prime. And, trade a second-round pick for him. Mortgage the future. I love it. Let's do it.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that would probably, if it didn't pan out, that would absolutely crush the Jets because they traded so much to get Aaron Rodgers into the building and then mortgaging even more for Devontae Adams. If that experiment were to fail, it would be an absolute disaster for the Jets organization. But speaking of disasters of organizations, we have the Eagles up next. And as everybody knows, the Eagles had just a massive fall off last season at the back end of the year. They couldn't win games. There was no continuity whatsoever for them. They lose Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown early this season. They're getting healthy. Do you think, in your opinion, that the Eagles could possibly turn their season around should their offense heal quicker? Because it does seem like their offense might be getting healthy at the right time. Do you think Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown are going to be able to provide the spark for the Eagles that will allow them to contend for what has somehow become a very competitive division? It is, you can't even call it the NFC least anymore this season because the Giants are winning games. The Commanders look like everybody said that they would look last year if they had a quarterback. The whole thing with the Commanders was they were a quarterback away. Jade Daniels seems to be running away with the offensive rookie of the year. So do you think Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown could provide the Eagles with the spark that they need to compete?
They'll make them a lot more competitive. For the first half of that Eagles-Bucks game last week, the Eagles' offense looked as bad as any offense in the league. Saquon was the only player they had that was able to do anything, and he couldn't hardly. He didn't do anything till the second half of that game. He had a great second half. They actually sort of came back and made it close at one point, but then the Bucks pulled away. The Eagles' defense hasn't, looked like the Eagles' defense of the past. They don't look like they're 2 years removed from being in the Super Bowl, that's for sure. They need receivers. Those are two of the best receivers in the game, two of the top 10 paid receivers in the game for a reason. Jalen Hurts is, I don't know. It's still tough to know what you have with him because that Super Bowl year, he was great, but now he leads the league in turnovers. So he needs some playmakers around him, someone to help him get the ball to, and try not to fumble, try not to throw interceptions because he is holding them back a little bit. Losing offensive linemen like they have as well, They need Lane Johnson back. That's a big hole on their left tackle.
Agreed.
New center this year. Obviously losing Jason Kelsey, one of the all-time greats. That hurts. They got Saquon. That's huge. If they could just put the players around him that are out with injury, that would make them a whole new team that, potentially the defense looks better if the offense can sustain drives. We don't really know, but I hope so. The NFC East it's going through one of those phases where every few years they suck. Every team is just atrocious. Those games are miserable to watch. And this year somehow the Giants are kind of turning it around. The Cowboys are the Cowboys. They have their good games. They have their bad games. The Eagles, it's fun to watch them sometimes. Sometimes it's miserable. But at least you got the Commanders, who do, like you said, have the front runner for Rookie of the Year, and they've put it all together. And they really could become one of the most exciting teams to watch in the league.
I love that you mentioned their defense, the Eagles' defense, maybe not living up to expectations this season. There was a cut this morning that blindsided me with the information behind it. So it turns out the Eagles organization has cut Devin White this morning. He was the all-pro linebacker from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Eagles brought him in hopes that he would fill a massive void in their defense as both a coverage and run-stopping linebacker, uber talented, very good guy. Apparently, he hasn't played a single snap for Philadelphia this season, and he was subsequently cut this morning. Would it possibly be time to hit the panic button on the Eagles defense after they traded Hassan Reddick to the Jets, who admittedly has been a detriment to the Jets on top of all their other issues? But they lose Hassan Reddick, somebody who played really, really hard for their defense. They brought in Devin White to shore up their middle linebacker position. He has yet to play a game and was subsequently cut. Would it be possible in your mind that maybe the Eagles really are just falling apart at the seams and might be potentially entering a soft rebuild courtesy of some piss-poor personnel decisions?
It's very possible, and if they are going to enter a soft rebuild, this is the time to do it because they still have young players. They got their receivers locked up under contract. They just re-signed both of them. Devin White surprised me just as much as it surprised you. He's 26 years old. He's still very young. He's just a couple years removed from being an All-Pro. 2020, I believe, was his last All-Pro year, and he was a stud. They won a Super Bowl with him being one of the best players on that defense, and their defense was great. So the fact he didn't play a single snap this year after they just signed him, and it's not like he didn't have other suitors in free agency. This might be a situation where he just wasn't fitting the scheme. I don't know what it was, but it's like, hey, let's just give this guy an opportunity to go sign somewhere else and play this year, because I think we both agree he's going to find a home and he's going to get on the field because he's a great player. Unless there's something else we don't know about going on in his personal life or something, there's no reason he shouldn't sign with somebody in the next couple weeks and get playing time pretty quickly.
I'm kind of hoping he goes back to the Bucs. I loved watching him next to Levante David. They made just an exquisite linebacker core, and they played really well off of each other. And like you said, it was a massive surprise that he just hasn't done anything for the Eagles because he seemed to be just a beacon of consistency for Tampa Bay his first 4 years in the league. So it'll be interesting to see what actually comes of Devin White now that he is a free agent, courtesy of the cut. But in terms of other teams trying to turn things around, we have two more big bullets here for the Around the League section of this show. The first being the Los Angeles Rams, where you have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who have been hurt for the majority of the regular season this year. Do you think that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua could possibly save the Rams? Right now, the Rams are a one-win team. The only team they beat is the 49ers, which we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes, to be honest. Do you think that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua could potentially give the Rams enough offensive firepower to get back to what everybody thought they might be able to do? I mean, I know they lose Aaron Donald. They've had a lot of pieces moving around, but I didn't expect their offense to look so anemic this season. And in my opinion, a large part of that is Matthew Stafford losing his primary target in Cooper Kupp, and then also big flashy receiver from last year, Puka Nacua, who came on really strong. So do you think that Puka and Cooper Kupp might be able to save the Rams season and allow them to compete in what has become a very competitive division, courtesy of a couple of other losses around the division?
Competitive meaning it's wide open because the teams that should have been great, the Arizona Cardinals, on paper potentially should have been a lot better than they are. The San Francisco 49ers on paper should have been one of the best teams in the league. Rams on paper, even with all the losses, they're an aging team, got an old quarterback, but he's a great player. They should be way better than 1-4. I think it's a little bit of a surprise to a lot of people the Seahawks are leading that division. They have looked beatable at times, but Geno Smith leads the league in pass yards. They've got a massive amount of talent at the wide receiver position. So I think Puka coming back, Cooper Kupp coming back, if they can both stay healthy. Kupp has started having some injury problems the last couple of years. That's obviously going to help them a lot, but they're going to have to definitely go on a bit of a run to close the season out if they want to see the postseason.
I definitely think that them coming back is going to make the Rams better. However, I think this might be a final goodbye for Matt Stafford after this season. I know he's mulled retirement a couple times in the past, and I really think that this may be his final year. I think we may lose a couple of high-profile quarterbacks after this season. Namely, Aaron Rodgers has talked about potentially dabbling in politics. Matt Stafford's getting older. He may step away. We may see a very different NFL landscape next season, which is exciting. All in itself, it is exciting. The final bullet that I have for Around the League is a team that we just mentioned. The San Francisco 49ers suck. They are terrible. They've lost to the Rams. They've lost to the Cardinals. 2 large divisional losses for them. CMC was afflicted with the Madden curse, and he may not even come back this year. They're saying he can come back around week 8. I have my doubts, courtesy of them being on all 3 of my fantasy leagues this season. Do you think it's time to hit the panic button with the 49ers? They've looked like dog shit most of the year. Brock Purdy, very obviously a system quarterback, right? LOL, just kidding. He's very good, but he can only do so much. Debo's been in and out of being healthy. Brandon Ayuk now has 1 game under his belt where he looks like the Brandon Ayuk that wanted to get paid, which was this previous weekend. He's been pretty bad otherwise. You have Juwan Jennings, whom has played he's played lights out this season, but do you think that maybe the 49ers have finally absorbed enough injuries for them to be a normal team? They're not Kansas City. They obviously can't sign bums off the street that just come in and, do whatever they want to do to an NFL defense. Are you worried about the 49ers' future?
I don't know if I'm worried about their future, meaning, the years beyond this, but this year, I think it's time for them to start panicking. This year, sitting at 2-3, being Super Bowl contenders, they're contenders every year with the roster they've put together. They do have depth. That's what it takes to get to the Super Bowl, and they've proven that every year, even with the injuries that have occurred. They've got a deep roster. They've got a lot of talent. Even this year with Christian McCaffrey getting hurt, Jordan Mason has stepped up. And he hasn't looked Christian McCaffrey-esque, but he has looked very serviceable as an NFL running back. But, yeah, I'd be panicking if I was a 49ers fan sitting at 3rd place in that division when your Super Bowl window is wide open right now. It's not a place you want to be.
Agreed. And just as a tidbit for fantasy, if you have a chance to trade Jordan Mason between the weeks of 6 and 8, you might be able to sell high on Jordan Mason, get a pretty large return, and then only lose 1 or 2 games. Should CMC actually return, if you can sell high on Jordan Mason with him only having 1 or 2 more games where he's not a backup behind who has arguably been one of the best running backs in the league over the last decade, this would be the time to pull the trigger. We're going into week 6. CMC is slated to potentially return week 8. And this would be a really good time to sell high for anybody who reached out and grabbed Jordan Mason in what was one of your best roster moves of the season, courtesy of CMC missing way more time than originally anticipated. But we are moving on into the next segment of this show. This will be another semi-new breakdown for one of my shows, not something I do every week by any means. But we have now detailed the top 2 teams in the league. There are only 2 undefeated teams left. And we are going to break down the teams that we believe might end up being the bottom of the cellar. And if you've listened to mine and Mean Gene shows on Sundays, or if you've been tuning into my personal production here on the Coach's Quarters, you'll know there's been a couple of teams that I have been pretty hard on. And one of them I can't even list anymore. So this is going to be a little interesting to watch as the season develops, but we have two teams left undefeated in the league. You have the Minnesota Vikings led by Sam Darnold, who is slated as the potential frontrunner for the MVP this year. And you have the Kansas City Chiefs, who have taken so many injuries on the nose, still remain undefeatable, that it's impossible to go toe-and-toe with them, even when their best receiver is freaking Juju Smith-Schuster. So out of the two best teams in the league right now, the two undefeated teams, Joey, you have Minnesota and you have Kansas City, the Vikings and the Chiefs. Who do you think is the best and which one represents their conference better?
I think the Vikings are the best story of the season. I don't think they're the best, unfortunately. Somehow the Chiefs they don't lose. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, they get help from the refs, but even still, the fact they're sitting at 5-0, the fact that Patrick Mahomes, he's an athlete. If you watch his games, he's back there running around in the pocket making everybody miss. He's got to be one of the toughest players to sack, which is surprising considering he doesn't really get a ton of rush yards. But he's Patrick Mahomes, and he's a 2-time MVP, 3-time Super Bowl champ for a reason. He's the best there is, possibly going to be the best there ever was. And until the Chiefs lose, 2 games in a row, it's going to be tough to say that they're not the best team. I do love the Vikings. I think they represent their conference the best out of those two because of the struggles they've had, because they lost their quarterback Kirk Cousins to free agency. The quarterback they drafted to replace him gets hurt in the preseason. Sam Darnold comes in. If anybody would have placed a bet on Sam Darnold at the beginning of the season to win MVP, even comeback player of the year, to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, you're going to be a rich man at the end of the season. He has played insane. Yeah, he's got some great receivers. He's got one of the best receivers in the NFL in Justin Jefferson. And then he's got Jordan Addison, who's one of the greatest young receivers in the NFL. Very underrated in my opinion. He's been a fantasy stud for the last 2 years considering his draft spot. But yeah, I love the Vikings. I'm excited to see what they do. A Vikings-Chiefs Super Bowl is entirely possible. And, the Chiefs might win it. But, hey, just seeing the Vikings get there would be cool. So,
what a beautiful time to be alive, right? And he did miss one thing for that Minnesota roster. They went out and they got Green Bay Packers running back Aaron Jones. And he is playing lights out. I got a front row seat to it. I don't know if the Vikings play the Dolphins this year, but we got absolutely thumped by the Vikings here in Houston. And Aaron Jones was a large part of that, albeit he got hurt last week, which ruined another one of my prop bets, might I add. But Aaron Jones has played lights out. I would love to see a Vikings versus Chiefs Super Bowl, just because, as I've mentioned on previous shows, I grew up in a Vikings household. My stepdad grew up in Minnesota. So it was one of those things where you kind of had, by proxy, you had to cheer for the Vikings and then also whatever team you liked. So I am a Texans and a Vikings fan because I grew up that way. Seeing Minnesota make a Super Bowl in a year that everybody thought was the beginning of a rebuild, right? They went out and they got J.J. McCarthy, who eventually got hurt, leading to Sam Darnold becoming the starter. Sam Darnold, now a star. He is the same Sam Darnold everybody thought we were getting 6 years ago when he entered the league. It's been kind of a cool thing to watch with Minnesota playing so well. And they went out, they got Stephon Gilmore in the offseason. They paid him $10 million on a 1-year contract. I think it was my week 1 show. I pissed all over him for that move. I had no idea why Stephon Gilmore wanted to come to Minnesota. I thought that it was just a money grab. He's getting $10 million for 1 more year of play. He might retire, might ride off into the sunset because he's also getting older. And that dude's still picking balls off, and he's putting the Minnesota offense in a great position week in and week out, playing lights out at the quarterback position. So it's been really interesting to watch. But on the flip side of things, right, we have 7 teams in the NFL who only have 1 victory. You're looking at the Los Angeles Rams, the Carolina Panthers, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the New England Patriots, all of which have 1 victory under their belt through 5 weeks in the NFL. In your opinion, Joey, who do you think are the 2 worst teams in the league right now? The bottom of the barrel, we've already gone over the top 2. out of those teams, whom do you believe are actually the worst, and whom do you believe will be able to pull away a little bit and not sit at the bottom for the rest of the season?
I'd like to say the Patriots are one of the worst. However, their defense is just so good. It feels wrong saying that they're the worst. In my opinion, right now, it's the Titans and the Carolina Panthers. Those are two teams. The Titans are, what are they doing at quarterback?
Right.
They traded Malik Willis this offseason.
Stud, by the way.
Yeah, is balling out in Green Bay as a backup. He's come in and played very well. And Will Levis, supposedly their quarterback of the future, needs to stick to making mayonnaise commercials because that guy is terrible at football. He did beat my Miami Dolphins, I will say. Well, not him. He threw an interception on the first drive and got hurt the second drive.
Y'all got beat by Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, it's a little more respectable. Let's go Mason Rudolph. He's another one of those guys that he's hard to hate on. But yeah, the Titans suck. The Panthers suck. Andy Dalton has been the lone bright spot for the Panthers. If not for him, they would be the only team with no victories this season. But he's not their savior. So, yeah, they suck. They're terrible. They're not going to – they're well on their way to another top draft pick at this rate.
You're not kidding. And of all these teams, I wanted to circle the Browns. I love the Browns. I'm glad they're crashing and burning for that idiotic trade that they made for Deshaun Watson. Shout out the Houston front office because – we fleeced the hell out of Cleveland on that one. But it's not all going to fall on Deshaun Watson. They also have Nick Chubb coming back soon. He was removed from IR. He is cleared to begin practicing, and I do believe he's going to elevate that Browns offense a little bit. No offense to Jerome Ford, who has played relatively well despite the offensive line struggles Cleveland has suffered from. But Nick Chubb's a different animal. If he can come back at 75% of what he was prior to his injury, I think that the Browns are going to be able to turn it around a little bit and possibly compete for a wild card. So I think I'm in agreement with you. I think the Titans and Mayo, Levis, and the Carolina Panthers might be the worst teams in the league. I do love what Andy Dalton has been able to do for that organization. I love that the moment that Andy Dalton started taking snaps as QB1 for Carolina, Chuba Hubbard has turned into a top 10 running back in the league. I liked him a lot in college. He was really, really good. He hadn't done much in the pros, and now it's starting to look more of a personnel issue than it has an actual skill issue for Chuba. But I do think I agree with you. I think the Titans suck. I think that they're easily going to get last place in the South, despite the fact that Jacksonville also only has one victory. And I think the Panthers are going to crash and burn and probably get the first pick in the draft. They're probably going to take a quarterback unless they're not ready to give up on the Bryce Young experiment. But what's happening in Carolina right now looks like it could shake out into like a Josh Rosen situation, right? Josh Rosen, huge in college. Everybody thought he was going to be good, thought he was going to translate. He gets to the league under Cliff Kingsbury, plays one terrible season, and then boom, you have Kyler Murray, right? So it is entirely possible that Carolina could pull the plug on Bryce Young early. They could draft another quarterback, enter Jalen Milroe or Cam Ward or Carson Beck or, basically any name you can draw out of a hat and reboot. So with that being said, whom do you think out of the current crop of incoming rookie quarterbacks that could potentially be drafted, just for shits and giggles, whom do you believe would give the Carolina Panthers the best shot at a victory, at being successful? Who would have more of that Stroud effect on the team versus the Bryce Young effect, where you can be supplanted by a veteran and it just immediately be made to look foolish. He doesn't look anything like he did at Alabama. He has not been very good. There's a reason they won't commit to letting him start another game, even when Andy Dalton struggles. Are there any quarterbacks that you believe that Carolina could draft that would give them the opportunity to potentially win more than 4 games next season?
I think the Panthers are a lot more than a quarterback away from being competitive. I think this is a very deep quarterback class coming up, which excites me as a Dolphins fan. Hate to say it, but I think it's time to move on from Tua. Anyways, for the Panthers, I don't know. I love Cam Ward. He's exciting to watch. We've watched a couple of his games now.
So much poise.
He's got poise. He's got the escapability. He's got the the improvisational playmaking ability, making basketball chest passes to a tight end for a 30-yard gain when he's in the grasp getting sacked. I mean, you don't see that a lot. Obviously, it won't entirely translate to the NFL. There's a lot better athletes. Shedeur Sanders, I don't know. I'm not sold on him. He's got a cannon of an arm, but he's not a winner. He seems to be more motivated by money and off-the-field success as opposed to on the field. Quinn Ewers is an interesting one.
Yeah.
I think he could kind of stretch the field for the Panthers a little bit. They have a young receiver in Xavier Legette, who is a speedy guy. And that's their downfield guy. Adam Thielen, if he could, put off retirement for another year or two, he could be that possession receiver that they need to, be a rookie quarterback safety blanket. But if the Panthers were to have a top 2, top 3 draft pick and they pick another quarterback, I feel bad for that guy because I think he's destined for failure because that entire roster needs so much help.
I agree. They mortgaged so much to bring Bryce Young there just to fail him in every aspect possible. So it is going to be a more difficult place for a quarterback to step in and be productive, to say the least. So we agree, right? Panthers and Titans round out the bottom of the league currently in our perspectives. Moving on, we are going to debut the Thursday night matchup. This week we have the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks facing off in yet another divisional matchup, which, by the way, the 49ers have really gone through the gauntlet early in the season. Not very many layups and a lot of just tough divisional games. 49ers v. Seahawks, how do you expect that game to go?
Hopefully it's an exciting game on paper. It's a great matchup. At the beginning of the season, that's one of those games that everybody kind of would have been pointing to, saying this could be a real important game as far as the division plays out. And it is. It still is. The 49ers aren't entirely out of it. They're one game back from the Seahawks. But both teams kind of seem to be going on different trajectories at this point. The 49ers are that team where, as we talked about before, their Super Bowl window's wide open, and the season they're having is in a complete disappointment. They need to win this game if they want to continue to compete in that division this year. I think the 49ers defense hasn't been the defense we're used to, and with the Seahawks offense being as electric as it is this year, I have a feeling it could be a high-scoring game. As you mentioned before, 49ers receiver.
Juwan Jennings.
Other one.
Brandon Ayuk.
Yes. Ayuk is finally finding his rhythm after missing the entire preseason and all of training camp. He definitely looked rusty. He didn't look like a top 3 paid receiver for the first couple of games. He looked like somebody who didn't know how to play football, couldn't catch a football, and looked like that contract was a waste. I think it just took him a little bit of time to get back in football shape, get used to catching footballs again. I think they can get rolling. It's going to be a good game. I think that we've had a couple good Thursday night games now, which is out of the ordinary for a Thursday night game. I'm excited that the NFL is actually giving us some matchups people want to see on Thursday nights so we get some good midweek football as opposed to just absolute snoozers.
Agreed. And I also think that this is going to be a semi-high scoring game. I don't think either team breaks 30 points, but I do think that this probably ends up being a 24-21 victory for Seattle. I think Seattle's probably going to be able to take this game. I don't know if the 49ers secondary can hold up to DK Metcalf. Jackson Smith and Jigba's been really good this season. Tyler Lockett is the ultimate possession receiver despite being 100 years old. It feels like Ty Lockett's a lot older than he actually is. I'm pretty sure he's only like 30. Like, he's reached his prime.
He is the ultimate professional at extending his career by taking zero contact, though.
Yep.
On a side note, that guy will fall down the second he sees a defender coming his way, it's hilarious. It cracks me up every time.
I love it. He's the perfect safety blanket. You never have to worry about him fumbling because he's down the moment he catches the ball. So, it's good for the Seahawks for being able to retain that kind of talent despite Pete Carroll not walking away, but walking away. He's no longer the head coach, still involved, but no longer the head coach. And it does feel like Ty Lockett has given Geno Smith that safety blanket that every quarterback wishes they could have because he doesn't drop very many balls, and he is the penultimate possession receiver. So that's going to be pretty interesting. I do think Seattle wins 24-21. I probably am going to prop bet for the kicker for Seattle to hit whatever his prop bet may be. It's probably going to be the over on 1.5. That seems to be the average prop bet for a kicker. And I don't know. Seattle's kicker is really good. And the 49ers just actually had to sign a new kicker courtesy of Jake Moody's injury last weekend. So we're going to have a fresh kicker for the 49ers, something that they've had to rely on quite a bit this season. And with the turnover and injuries, Jordan Mason's not necessarily beginning to get found out, but his play has not necessarily improved week in and week out. It does seem like we've reached the peak of what he's capable of, which is over 100 all-purpose yards every week. So this isn't by no means an insult. But I do think that Seattle has the right tools, courtesy of still being healthy, to beat the 49ers this Thursday night. So this will be a good game. This will be a really good game, and I cannot wait to watch it. Beyond Thursday night, I've got a couple of Sunday surprises, and by a couple, I literally mean a couple. I couldn't come up with very many things to talk about that are just exciting to talk about, but there were two, right? Drake May finally getting his first start for the New England Patriots. They have decided to move away from Jacoby Brissett this week, which is interesting because they're playing the Texans, and historically speaking, the Texans can't beat rookie quarterbacks. We're terrible against rookie quarterbacks. That's been consistent for the last 15 years. Just no good against rookie quarterbacks. So we have Drake May getting his first start this Sunday. And courtesy of Derek Carr's oblique injury that he suffered Monday night, Spencer Rattler, courtesy, this information coming straight from the horse's mouth of you, Spencer Rattler might get his first start for the New Orleans Saints this weekend. So that is pretty cool. It's neat to think about, especially after Jake Haener, I believe, got the start in place of Derek Carr when he got hurt. Looked pretty good, threw a couple of just lasers. And New Orleans is talking about seeing what they may have in Spencer Rattler. So of those two things, Drake May and Spencer Rattler, both rookie quarterbacks, potentially getting their very first start in the NFL. What would surprise you the most out of those two? Would it be a Drake May victory over the Houston Texans or a Spencer Rattler victory over
the Buccaneers?
The Buccaneers.
Well, I think it would be a Drake May. The Patriots offense has been terrible. As I mentioned earlier, I took the live halftime bet of Jacoby Brissett hitting his underpass yards, which was set at 113 yards. That is an insanely low number for a quarterback. It would have hit, courtesy of the Dolphins not being able to convert one first down with under a minute left. It did hit because they were playing prevent defense, gave up a 30-yard pass at the end, yada, yada. I lose my money. Awesome. But, I think the Drake May coming in, playing well against the Texans, who have a pretty solid defense, beating that team, that'd be the biggest surprise. Not to take anything away from Spencer Rattler, I'm excited for him. I liked watching him at South Carolina. He had kind of an underrated career. He beat some really good teams, lost to some really bad teams. South Carolina kind of always does that. But he was one of the top-rated high school prospects when he came out. I think he was actually maybe number one. But he's always been that guy that he's got the potential. He's a good athlete. He can throw the ball. And the Saints do have a good offense. Last night was crazy seeing how little they could do. They were playing the Chiefs, who seem to do that against good teams, just shut them down. But I really hope Rattler comes in. I hope the Bucs still win because I'm a Mayfield fan. But Drake May, as much as it would break my heart to see him win a game, I want the Patriots to crash and burn. I really do. But that'd be a surprise to me.
Nice. And speaking of surprises, we have the opportunity now. And this should have been a part of an earlier segment in the show. It was not, because my organizational skills for this particular show, I've bounced around a little bit during the organization process of setting this rubric up for how we're going to talk about this. The Jets have the possibility of doing the craziest thing we've ever seen in the NFL, and that would be bringing Bill Belichick back. So Belichick would leave the Patriots organization, as he did. He's been terrific in the media. Everybody's seen a side of him that none of us thought existed. He's actually incredibly funny if you like shows like The Office and you like dry humor. But the Jets could bring in Bill Belichick as head coach to supplant Robert Saleh, right? And your Dolphins could have to face Belichick 2 times this season again moving forward. And, as much as I really do want Drake May to succeed, I do think that maybe they reached for him a little bit, but I don't wish bad things on very many people in the league because I enjoy parity. How awesome would it be if Belichick came to the Jets and mopped the floor with the Patriots until he retired from good? Wouldn't that just be the craziest thing?
It'd be awesome if he came back to the Jets because the Dolphins would finally beat Bill Belichick. I would love that. I'm here for it. I support that decision by the Jets front office, and yeah, go for it.
Hilarious. Well, we are about to bring this show to a close. I've only got one more thing to list before we actually shut her down. We have 4 teams on a bye week for week 6. We have the Los Angeles Rams. We have your Miami Dolphins. We have the undefeated Vikings and the undefeated Chiefs. So just for anybody looking to play fantasy football or looking for, potentially the information that you're missing in regards to the players that aren't actually going to play this week, those are the 4 teams that do not have a game. It's going to be a great bye week for the Dolphins. I think they need this time to get healthy and kind of recenter and refocus so that they have an opportunity to, win games against teams that aren't terrible like the Patriots. And it's also going to be a chance for the Vikings to get a little healthier. Sam Darnold's gotten beaten up the last couple of weeks. Justin Jetta's had a couple of injuries over the last couple of weeks. Jordan Addison's gotten hurt over the last couple of weeks. Nothing major, but minor bumps and bruises. And the bye week does allow for a full week of rest where they can kind of refocus on what the penultimate goal is for the season. So those are your teams on a bye week. And that's going to close her down. That's it. That's all we got for this week's show. Everybody just give a huge round of applause for Joey McGinnis. I am hoping that I can bring him on more shows moving forward. He is a lot more busy than I am these days. But it might actually be possible to get him on a little more often. Big shout out to Titus, biggest supporter of the show, who has been whining in the background for what seems like the entirety of this show. And we are gonna take off. Thank you all, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you for everybody who has supported the show in the past. Thank you to my terrific editor who does way more work on this show than I actually do. I just talk into a microphone. That dude actually does things for it and makes this entire show possible. So shout out to Chris. Shout out to today's guest, Joseph McGinnis. And thank you all. Have a terrific weekend. And let's go for NFL Ball Week 6.